Hello, and welcome to the DCNR Grants Workshop breakout session for the Community and Watershed Forestry Grant Opportunity. My name is Valley Edenbow. I am the Rivers Program Specialist for DCNR's Bureau of Recreation and Conservation, and I manage many of the community and watershed forestry projects that we'll talk about today. I'm joined by my colleague Kelly Rossiter, who is also experienced with this grant program. The agenda for today is to give a brief program overview and then discuss what makes a great application by introducing each application question and giving you tips. The Community Watershed Forestry Program offers funding for 3 watershed forestry practices. The first, riparian forest buffers, establish trees and shrubs within 300 feet of waterways, such as streams, rivers, and lakes, on private or public land. Lawn to habitat is the conversion and establishment of presently maintained lawn to actively managed upland forest or perennial native meadow on private or public lands. Urban and community forestry builds capacity within communities to plan, plant, and care for trees in publicly accessible places. More details about each project type are available from fact sheets on the DCNR Customer Service Grant Portal. By installing sustainable forest practices on public and private property, community and watershed forestry projects improve local water quality, enhance wildlife habitat, and increase community resiliency. The CWF grant program provides financial assistance to identify locations that could most benefit from these practices, and then the design, implementation, and establishment of the practices. This could include tree inventories and management plans, workforce development related to urban and community forestry, hazardous tree management with one-to-one replacement rates, including pruning practices. Tree risk assessment by a qualified professional is required prior to DCNR authorization of any removal of trees. You can include the cost of this service in your budget. Eligible costs include planting and establishment materials such as trees, invasive species control, tree tubes, mulch, or other supplies for site-appropriate planting techniques. The cost of labor or staff time directly related to the grant scope of work is also an eligible cost. This might include landowner outreach, designing plantings, planting site preparation, planting buffers, meadows, and trees, and post-planting establishment like watering and weed control, facilitating training for stewardship programs like tree tenders and riparian rangers. Eligible planting locations include private and public properties for riparian forest buffers and lawn to habitat projects. These projects require a 25-year landowner agreement. Urban and community forestry plantings should take place on public property or in the public right-of-way. In the past, applicants have been able to bundle multiple planting sites and request funding for more than one watershed forestry practice with a single application. This year, we ask you to submit a separate application for each practice for which you are applying, unless the practices are all taking place on the same property, in which case you can submit a single application. So, for example, if you're planning to implement several acres of riparian forest buffers and several acres of lawn to habitat conversions, we'd ask you to submit 2 applications. Or if you're planning to do an urban and community forestry project on the same property that includes a buffer, you could submit just 1 application. The minimum grant request is $50,000. This year, there will be a $250,000 soft cap on awards. Applicants can request more, but should detail a clear plan as to how they can work within the $250,000 limit. Projects will be awarded greater than $250,000 only if funding remains after all eligible applications have been funded. The match requirement is 20% applicant match to 80% DCNR funding. For example, a grant request of $50,000 requires a match of $12,500, and would cover a total project cost of $62,500. Cash and non-cash sources of match are eligible. Administrative costs are limited to 5% of the DCNR grant amount. The program can fund post-planting establishment on previously planted sites up to 20% of the DCNR grant amount. So please note, new this year, we may award grants above the soft cap when increased grant dollars are available for community and watershed forestry projects. However, you should approach your grant application with the $250,000 cap in mind and talk closely with your regional advisor if you anticipate your project budget may go above that $250,000 soft cap. If you're interested in this grant opportunity, the first thing you'll want to do is contact your DCNR regional advisor to discuss your project. You'll also want to familiarize yourself with the ready-to-go requirements early on in the process. These are available in the grant portal, and we're highlighting a few here. Match needs to be secured and documented at the time of application. A realistic, accurate, and detailed budget needs to be provided for each project type. Clear, concise, and detailed scope of work should be included, and the resolution page should be properly executed. The Community Watershed Forestry grant application has a different set of questions than other applications, so pay close attention here. I will go through the questions you're being asked along with the slides that give you tips on how best to answer. For the first question, project scope, applicants are asked to provide an overview of your project activities, including objectives, proposed schedule, measurable outcomes, and unique environmental or conservation benefits that this project will provide. Applicants can choose to focus on any of the following to elevate the application to the highest scores possible. It is not necessary to use all of these in one application. Unique benefits to communities, programs, and initiatives, such as the social, ecological, and economic benefits. Creative and innovative design or planting concepts, such as mini grants, filling a funding gap, or reaching a new set of landowners. Buffer widths of at least 50 feet and habitat projects of at least 0.1 acres. Detailed post-planting establishment and stewardship practices. Please note, include acreages of the forestry practices. For example, if you are proposing a total of 10 acres of riparian forest buffer or 3 acres of lawn to habitat. If they are conventional plantings or multifunctional, which means they are used for production, this can apply to lawn to habitat and urban and community forestry projects as well. For example, an urban food forest, planting a hazelnut riparian buffer grove, or perennial herbs in a forest understory. The qualifications section asks you to describe your organization's past experience completing similar projects and current capacity to manage the proposed project. It directs you to outline the related expertise of key staff who will be engaged in this project. If you plan to involve other partners, please list those partners and their related role and expertise. If you plan to utilize volunteers, please describe their role and any training you will provide. The best application scores go to projects that show strong related experience or a clear description of ability to build capacity and experience through this project. Established capacity to manage the project both in the field and the administrative aspects of the DCNR grant portal. Define clear partner and volunteer roles. This is very important and will also help you be organized in your approach. Include letters from your partners and your organization if there are volunteer hours or staff hours that you are donating to the project as match. It is important to show that you have committed match and it is noted in writing and loaded to your application. The next question, the outreach question, directs you to explain how you will identify and engage local partners, landowners, and other key stakeholders. Please note, this is for targeted landowner outreach only. DCNR does not fund general education through this grant. The strongest applications present an equitable approach to landowner outreach and engagement. Commitment letters from landowners and partners that include the donation type and value of the donation. Clearly defined roles and responsibilities for the proposed project tasks. The project methodology section requests that you explain how you will complete the scope of work. Provide clear and concise details of the activities and resources required. Detail the roles of the applicant, landowner, and other partners or stakeholders in implementing the new plantings and any other aspect of the proposed scope of work. To score well, be sure to provide detailed activities and present a strategic, logical, and realistic methodology. For example, explain how you will secure landowners or public planting sites and plant trees and establish meadow or riparian buffer. How will you care for the planting? How will your timeline fit the work within the grant contract period, January 2027 to December 2030? Explain how your project will fit the soft cap of $250,000, or how it could be scaled up if adding funding becomes available. The project establishment and stewardship component is a two-part question. First, detail your strategy for post-planting establishment of the practices. Include how, when, and by whom the activities will be accomplished for the first 5 years after planting. Second, explain how you will steward the planting over the long term, after the first 5 years, in terms of such things as monitoring and who's doing what to sustain the buffer, meadow, or tree planting. Describe what your organization, the local community, or other stakeholders are doing to build capacity and expertise for long-term stewardship. Third, if your proposal includes post-planting establishment activities on plantings funded by other sources or previous grants, describe those activities here. Higher scoring applications include strong related experience, a detailed and realistic plan for post-planting establishment, defined roles and responsibilities, a detailed and realistic plan for long-term stewardship after the initial 5 years. And be sure to show organizational and community capacity to support long-term stewardship. If your grant proposal includes post-planting establishment for projects previously planted, then it is important to keep some things in mind. The work must be done within the first 5 years of the planting completion date. If funded, plan on a January 2027 contract begin date and December 2030 contract end date. The cost of post-planting establishment on previously planted practices cannot exceed 20% of your grant request. Where possible, include details about the previously planted projects to your plan to establish as part of this grant, such as the date they were installed, number of acres or number of trees, practice type, etc. For the project budget, the strongest budgets propose detailed and reasonable costs, and essential planting accessory costs only. For example, minimizing the cost of necessary fencing for agricultural buffers. Overall, DCNR is looking for a high level of cost effectiveness, and top-scoring grants provide details such as the cost per acre or the cost per tree, the cost per tree for post-planting establishment, the anticipated cost per acre for long-term stewardship. And remember, staff time on project activities directly related to the scope of work is eligible under the CWF grant opportunity and needs to be itemized in the budget. Staff time for scope of work task includes writing planting plans, talking to and enrolling landowners, and getting the plants in the ground. DCNR aims to support the capacity of our partner organizations to continue to increase the scale of community watershed forestry project implementation statewide. Staff time should be reported as billable rates or the employee's hourly wage plus benefits. Eligible project activities for staff time can also include volunteer engagement and training staff or volunteer labor. Administrative costs are limited to 5% of the grant requests. We want to emphasize that for CWF grants, include the acreage and descriptions in your budget. Many budgets come in without these details and are challenging for our reviewers to evaluate. The budget should also demonstrate how the project can be scaled to fit within the soft cap of $250,000. Some more keys to success. Partner with multiple landowners. Plant on lands the grantee owns, or plant on your community's parks or preserves. DCNR also looks favorably on grantees applying to conduct CWF mini-grants and subawards. These organizations request a lump sum of funding and then provide their own mini-grant or subaward program. Please note, mini-grant match can only be counted toward the mini-grants and cannot be considered match toward mini-grant program administration or other work plan tasks within the grant. Remember, you can get consultations on your projects before you apply. Local conservation districts, the DCNR service foresters, and watershed forestry technicians can provide technical assistance to help strengthen your application. Match can be cash from funding sources or non-cash match like donated materials and volunteer labor. For DCNR, federal funding, most state funding, there are a few exceptions, and local government funding sources are eligible as match. The National Fish and Wildlife Foundation offers both federal and private foundation funding. You may receive either kind. Please be aware of your matching requirements. You may also want to explore local municipal contributions. Some municipalities have stormwater fees that can be used toward projects, shade tree commissions that can offer volunteers or outreach hours, or MS4 permit requirements that can be fulfilled by the implementation of these practices. Private and community sources can also offer great match, either cash or non-cash. Several foundations operating in Pennsylvania support this work. Local nonprofits focused on conservation, watershed, and land management. Some utility companies, water companies, electric companies have grant programs that can support some of these practices or could help provide volunteer hours. Large corporations and employers, universities, religious entities, and others are often helpful to provide volunteers, and some are willing to offer their own property as a planting site. Generally, volunteer hours and donated services are eligible as match. Community forestry specialists are available to provide technical assistance for your community forestry projects. Our program managers for each of the project areas is available to provide technical expertise and connect you with their team for additional technical assistance. Teddy Stark oversees the riparian forest buffers, Kelsey Mummert, the Lawn to Habitat program, and Ned Brockmeyer, Urban and Community Forestry. There are watershed forestry specialists available to assist in the regions with riparian buffer and lawn to habitat projects. Urban and Community Forestry also offers regional specialists to assist with your projects. For assistance with developing your grant application and how to apply, you should work with your DCNR BRC regional advisor. Thank you for attending the CWF Grant Program breakout session. If any questions remain today, please feel free to reach out to me or Kelly or your local regional advisor. We're here to help and hope you have a great rest of your day.